If this video found you in your recommended, you are most likely a Disney fan and may have no experience with icebergs. Returning viewers of my channel already know what an iceberg is, but if you don't, it's basically a tier list that begins with most known facts and ideas of a topic, dropping all the way down to least known facts. This iceberg series will go in depth on all of the cancelled, lost, extinct, and forgotten Disneyland attractions at the Disneyland Resort in Southern California. Just a quick thing to note before I move on, I noticed a lot of you that watch my videos are not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe for more iceberg content as well as my other video essay style videos. And be sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of those uploads. In an effort to make my content better, I'm trying to provide more information for each item on each iceberg I do from here on out. This iceberg in particular is going to be split into 3 parts, with this video going into layers 1 through 2, video 2 going into layers 3 through 5, and the last video going into layers 6 and 7. Layers 1 to 2 is still pretty long, so if you have to clean your room, do your homework, or need to kick back and get some work done, I suggest leaving the video on and listening to the audio. Now sit back and relax while I dive deep into the contents of this iceberg. This iceberg was created by Reddit user Chippy Cookie. If throughout the video you guys noticed that something you wanted to be on this iceberg is not on it, feel free to comment below as I may add it into the next few layers. With that said, let's get into layer 1 of the iceberg. An important thing to note before we get into layer 1 is that the entire iceberg is not about all of Disney attractions across every single park. The items on this list only discuss the extinct attractions from the Disneyland Resort in Southern California. So if you're watching this iceberg hoping that I will mention your favorite forgotten ride from Walt Disney World in Florida or Hong Kong Disneyland, this is not the iceberg for you. So layer 1 will mainly go over some of the more recent closures and changes that have took place in the Disneyland Resort, and also give some common sources for first-hand knowledge on Disneyland's history. With that said, let's get into the first item. Snow White's Enchanted Wish. Snow White's Enchanted Wish is a ride that is currently at Disneyland. However, novice fans of Disney may not know that this ride is actually a rework of 2 previous versions of the ride. The earliest version of this ride was simply titled Snow White and Her Adventures. This version was released with the first opening of the Disneyland park in 1955. Snow White and Her Adventures wasn't going to last as Disney parkgoers began complaining that the ride was far too scary with its scenery. What I am showing you isn't the original ride from Disneyland because I was not able to find any footage on it, but this is the Disney World version, which is said to be essentially the same exact ride. From the footage, you can see how disturbing and creepy the experience might be for a small child that might have gone on this ride. The thing that really made kids feel uncomfortable was this part with the trees, where these terrifying looking trees lunge forward at your ride vehicle while screaming and wailing loudly. Another thing that bothered a lot of guests was that Snow White was nowhere to be seen on the original ride. This is because most of Disneyland's rides at the time tried executing this idea where you are the character in the movie. Basically, Snow White is not on the ride because you are supposed to be Snow White, meeting the 7 dwarves and making her way through the dark forest. In 1983, the entire Fantasyland dark rides were expanded and redesigned to make the rides a lot more appealing to attendees of the park. Among the redesigns was in fact Snow White and Her Adventures. The redesign took place in 1983 and was replaced with a less scary and dark version of the ride that was simply called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Even with the new renovations, the ride was still pretty dark for children and wasn't the type of ride you generally want to put your kids on. The biggest differences between the 1955 version and the 1983 version was that Snow White could now be seen in the ride. Along with this, there was better lighting and generally a better vibe than the original ride gave off. However, last year in 2020, it was announced that Disney would be replacing Snow White's Scary Adventures with a new, lighthearted version titled Snow White's Enchanted Wish. This new revision included better animations, more projections on the walls, and told the story a bit better overall. They even moved Snow White from the staircase and is now animated on the floor dancing with the 7 dwarfs. There's obviously more that was changed with the ride, but these are the known changes that we are aware of as of today. I guess we will have to wait and see what it's like when people swarm the theme park this week. Moving on. Princess and the Frog Splash Mountain. Splash Mountain is one of those classic rides at Disneyland that everyone knows about. I myself go on the ride almost every single time, rain or shine. However, in June of 2020, it was announced that Splash Mountain would be getting reworked into a Princess and the Frog theme. This gained popularity when before the announcement, a Twitter user named Frederick Chambers tweeted out his idea of a re-theme for Splash Mountain. The post contains several photos that take the reader through what his version of the ride would be like. His version basically takes you through some of the events of the movie, with the ride being mainly focused on the Bayou theme and getting back to New Orleans in order to break the curse. After this tweet came out with all of these photos explaining what the ride could be like, Disney actually came out a few weeks later and officially announced the rework of the ride during a keynote presentation at the IAAPA Expo. They also followed this announcement up with an official tweet announcing the retheming of Splash Mountain, explaining how both the Disneyland variant and the Walt Disney version would get a retheme. Many people, myself included, hope that it's not just a simple reskin of the original ride, but an actual rework. Whether or not it's going to be a reskin or an actual complete rework is not known at the moment, but we can certainly hope that Disney does the right thing, as all eyes are definitely going to be on this ride when it finally comes out. Before we move on, the rest of Layer 1 talks about YouTube creators and websites whose main theme is to talk about the extinct attractions. So if you are simply here just for the forgotten attractions, I recommend skipping over to Layer 2 right now, because the rest of Layer 1 will simply be talking about the channels and not so much the actual rides. Check the pinned comment for the timestamps. With that said, let's move on. Defunctland. If you guys are big fans of cancelled amusement park attractions, then you should definitely know what Defunctland is. Defunctland is a YouTube series that goes over a wide variety of history on extinct theme park and entertainment attractions from all over the world. The name Defunctland comes from the word defunct, which means no longer living, existing, or functioning. This channel has been uploaded to since February 15th of 2017 and has since uploaded well over 140 videos explaining various attractions that have become obsolete or forgotten. He explains each topic in a documentary style format, with his most popular videos talking of the decline of the Nickelodeon Hotel and the history of Disney's worst attraction, which funny enough is actually another entry down on this list. I recommend checking out his videos if you have the time. Each one is pretty well made and honestly a fun watch if you love learning about the history behind the amusement parks. The YouTube channel can be found in the link below. Moving on. Yesterworld Entertainment. Yesterworld Entertainment is a YouTube channel that was created back in 2016, with its oldest video being posted on November 25th of the same year. Yesterworld is similar to Defunctland in that it produces documentary style videos that dive deep into the forgotten and shut down attractions from various theme parks. The main difference between the two is that Yesterworld doesn't just do theme parks, as he frequently goes over other topics such as forgotten films and movies, obscure cancelled video games, and in general just lost media. He gained a lot of popularity from his videos about the Forgotten Jaws ride and Magic Kingdom's Stitch's Great Escape ride. I recommend this channel if you want a fun and less serious style of documentary videos that still go over the overall theme of forgotten attractions. Check the description below for a link to Yesterworld Entertainment. Moving on. Yesterland/Mice Chat. Yesterland is a website that stockpiles all of the attractions that have been shut down and closed from all of the Disneyland parks from around the world. If there's a forgotten ride that you loved, a shop you used to go to that disappeared, or even something as abstract as a parade or a show that got shut down, it's almost guaranteed that it will be on this website for you to view once again. It appears that the website began in 1995 and is frequently updated to this day with lost attractions. While we're talking about Yesterland, I wanted to touch upon another website called Mice Chat, which is similar to Yesterland, but the difference is that it doesn't stockpile lost rides, but rather pumps out articles about updates on Disney theme parks. A link will be in the description for both of these websites. Enough said, let's move on. Offhand Disney. Offhand Disney is a YouTube channel created back in December of 2016, with its oldest video being uploaded on January 1st of 2017. This channel mainly focuses on only Disney parks and goes over little known facts, theories, and updates on all of the Disney parks and Disney films. This channel gained a lot of traction when it began posting videos about how Disney tricks us into doing what they want us to do. For example, in this video, he talks about how Disneyland employs several tricks in order to keep park goers from realizing they are in a theme park in the middle of Anaheim. Instead, Disneyland manages to make us feel like we stepped into a new reality. We look around us and feel immersed as if we are actually in the area because of the techniques that Disney uses, such as sight lines and forced perspective. That's just one example from one of Offhand Disney's many videos. If you guys are big Disneyland fans, I would highly recommend checking this specific channel out. I will leave a link below. Moving on. Disney Dan. Disney Dan is a YouTube channel that was created in September 2014, with its oldest video being created on September 11th of 2014. Since Disney Dan's first upload, he has created several hundred videos on all things Disney, from merchandise to theme parks to even video games. The funny thing is that he began his channel almost 5 years ago, and for 2 years he only uploaded gameplay and unboxing videos until he gained widespread popularity in July of 2017 when he amassed over 4 million views on his new series titled Distory, which is meant to be a play on words for Disney history. He still uploads these Distory videos to this day, with the topics for each video varying but still remaining in the Disney theme. If you love all things Disney and aren't just in it for the history aspect, I'd recommend Disney Dan's channel, as he goes over a lot of topics regarding everything Disney that has ever been created. I will leave a link to the channel below. Moving on. That will actually bring us to layer 2. I will admit, layer 1 was pretty short because it was mostly YouTube channels that talked about Disneyland history, but now we are going to get into some real Disney history, as the rest of this iceberg goes over lots of extinct attractions. Layer 2 specifically covers a lot of the popular and known extinct attractions that most casual Disney fans should know about. Let's kick layer 2 off with the first item, the Main Street Electrical Parade. The Main Street Electrical Parade was a nighttime parade that isn't like most parades at Disneyland. Most of the parades at Disneyland take place during the day. This means you're left with the hot sun beating down on you while you try your best to get any seats that will allow for a good angle of the parade. That is a typical experience trying to get to see one of these iconic spectacles. However, the Main Street Electrical Parade was different. It had these bright lights flashing everywhere. It had some of the most infectious techno dance music of all time. And best of all, it took place only at nighttime, which meant that no matter the viewing angle, you always got to see some awesome lights dancing their way down Main Street. Now, I expect that most Disney goers know about this parade from its run in 2017 at the Disneyland Resort in Southern California. But unbeknownst to a lot of park goers nowadays, the parade has actually been around for a lot longer. Its original run began in the California Disneyland Park from 1972 all the way until 1996. Before it premiered in 1972, during the first rehearsal of the parade, a float crashed into a building on Main Street while some performers' costumes emitted sparks. Eventually, the parade would successfully debut on June 17, 1972. The original spectacle in 1972 consisted of 2D style floats that were carried by people down Main Street. It got a huge update from this point on, as you can see from these pictures taken in the 1996 run. The parade featured such characters as Pinocchio, the Seven Dwarfs, Captain Hook, and other various Disney characters from that time. The parade would eventually close in light of a replacement show titled Light Magic, but the new parade was not well received. Unfortunately, the criticism received of the new Light Magic parade was not enough to prompt Disney to bring back the original electrical parade. We know this to be true, as Disneyland would not bring the original parade back until years later in 2017. During this time, the parade was featured at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, where it ran from 1999 to 2001. It would then reappear for 10 years from 2010 to 2016 at the same park. After the 2016 run in the Magic Kingdom, the parade was then scheduled to be brought back to California's Disneyland Resort for a brief period of time. The initial plan was to have the parade come on January 20th of 2017 and end in that coming June. However, because of popular demand, the parade stayed in the park all the way to August 20th of the same year. It has made several appearances in the same Disneyland park, but the last official run of the parade was back in 2019. Since the last run on September 30th of 2019, the parade has not seen the light of day, but knowing Disney, the parade will most likely come back briefly in the coming years. Moving on. People Mover. The People Mover was a 16-minute ride that gave guests a unique view and tour of Disneyland's Tomorrowland. The ride gave a glimpse into various attractions, shows, and shops around the park. One part of the ride even included a view of Walt Disney's vision for the future, which would end up becoming the Epcot Center that we know from the Walt Disney World. A cool thing to note about the People Mover was that it was originally called the People Mover presented by Goodyear. The reason for this was because at the time, most of the rides in Tomorrowland were simply sponsored by bigger companies. For example, the Goodyear sponsor featured Goodyear tires on the tracks that were put every 9 feet, which is what made the track move. The People Mover was a big success when it saw its debut in Tomorrowland at the Disneyland Resort. The attraction was simply a transport attraction, meaning that it wasn't really a ride to get on to have fun, but more a chill ride to take a 10-minute break from all the walking you've done around the park. I imagine this, along with all that the ride had to offer, meant that it was the ultimate ride to get on to enjoy yourself while also getting some relaxing rest from all the time you spent walking through the park. The attraction first debuted in 1967 as part of Tomorrowland's makeover. The ride lasted all the way until 1996. The next part I wanted to mention about this ride goes over some serious injuries that actually resulted in death of some of the guests. So if you want to skip past this, go ahead and go to this timestamp. Now, with such a chill ride that literally went no faster than 10 miles per hour, you'd expect no accidents to occur on the ride, but this ride has actually had some pretty serious incidents. A few of the incidents that occurred resulted in a few injuries to some of the guests, as well as causing 2 deaths. The 2 deaths were caused by similar actions. Apparently, when this ride debuted, it became a sort of game amongst teenagers to jump between the moving vehicle cars. They did this because of how fun it made the ride. I can imagine how bored teenagers must have gotten on this ride, with it being 16 minutes of basically nothing. However, this mentality actually got 2 young men killed at 2 different times. In 1967, just 1 month after the attraction was open, a 16-year-old boy was killed while trying to jump between 2 moving vehicles on the ride. He stumbled mid-jump and was dragged a few hundred feet before the ride stopped. The same exact thing happened in June of 1980, when an 18-year-old man was crushed underneath the track while trying to jump between the moving cars. This accident occurred as the ride entered the superspeed tunnel. Besides the 2 deaths, there was another incident in 1972 where a teenage girl dropped her mouse ears on the track. The girl and her cousin hopped onto the track to retrieve her ears. They ended up getting her ears back, and the first girl was able to get back into the car successfully, but the second girl decided she'd just run through the tunnel and get out to the exit. In doing so, she actually ran out of the exit, but there was no flooring for her to stand on, so she ended up falling 30 feet below and sued Disney. Now, I don't know the whole story for why she sued, because it seems like it was her fault, but apparently she had a good case against them. Now, despite all these accidents, the People Mover was not closed until 1995. The ride wasn't even closed for the incidents either. It was closed because of yet another reimagining of Tomorrowland. The People Mover would be replaced by, funny enough, the next entry on the iceberg, Rocket Rods. Rocket Rods was the replacement ride for the People Mover. It was introduced to Tomorrowland in May 22nd of 1998 as a part of the newest remodel of the land. The ride was a more hyper and fast-paced version of the People Mover, as it used the exact same track layout. The only difference this time was that there was an actual track instead of the Goodyear wheels that pulled the carts around. The ride would start out doing a wheelie and then accelerate from 0 to 35 miles per hour, which by Disney standards at the time was pretty darn fast. This all sounded pretty good on paper, but unfortunately for the ride, the exhilarating experience was always cut short because of the track layout. As said before, the track layout was the exact same as the People Mover, which meant that it was not built for such a fast-paced experience. This was found to be true because the Rocket Rods vehicle would always have to slow down at every single turn, and with how many turns the People Mover track originally had, it really put a damper down on the fast-paced nature of the ride. The actual ride itself would take you through Tomorrowland, much like its predecessor would, as you would race past the Star Tours line, but it was different now as some parts of the ride were now blocked off. Disney placed a mirror right here to block off a part of the view that was not originally blocked off on the People Mover ride, but was now blocked off on the Rocket Rods version. This mirror also acted as a set piece that made you think you were going to collide with another vehicle, when in actuality, it was just used to disguise yet another slow turn. Other parts of the ride that were modified was this part right here, where the view of the Starcade was completely blocked off. After this, you would rush past Space Mountain, but there wasn't even ample time to take in the view. The best part of the ride was near the end, when you would get a fantastic view of Tomorrowland and then get a glimpse into some construction which would eventually become the Innovention Center. As much good as the ride did, there was too many mistakes and mishaps that would frequently happen over the course of the ride's stay. The ride would frequently be stopped after experiencing several issues with the vehicles. Since the track was unchanged from the original ride, the amount of turns would cause each vehicle to constantly slow down and speed up, which completely screwed up the engines and would cause the ride to have constant maintenance and evacuations as a result. Another issue that was simply an oversight was the wait times to get on the ride. To add insult to injury, the amount of people that could get into one rocket was only 5 people, which meant the wait time would only get longer from here on out. The lines and wait times got so long that for the first time in Disneyland history, they introduced the single rider line. So all of you single rider fans can thank Rocket Rods for introducing us to this miracle of a solution. Honestly though, before I move on, I hate being the person that gets the single rider. It's always so awkward. Let me know your guys' personal experience with single riders. I always hate being the person that's stuck with the single rider. Anyways, if you thought that everything so far was bad, Rocket Rods would only go downhill from here, with one incident pushing the ride very close to its inevitable demise. During one run of the Rocket Rods ride, a brake chute broke off a vehicle and flew into the crowd in Tomorrowland. To be fair, this was actually a rumor, but even so, all of these issues only took place within the first month of it opening. The ride would close and open back up 3 months later, but it still had so many operational issues that it was forced to close down yet again within the next 2 years in the year 2000. The ride was set to open back up in spring of 2001 with new lights on the ride and a new color scheme, but when the reopening date came and went, fans realized that the ride would be closed for good. Eventually, Disney would come out and officially state the ride was closed. Now, the sad thing is that the remnants of the People Mover and the Rocket Rods ride can still be seen today in Tomorrowland. Only now, it's a shell of its former self, with the tracks being riddled with rust and trees trying their best to cover up one of Disney's biggest failures. The obvious decision here would be to bring one of the rides back, but that was shown to be far too expensive as the track is far too rusted and requires lots of money to tear out the old track and to put a new one in, which would also cause a lot of construction to be done around all of Tomorrowland. The next obvious choice would be to rip it out of the park entirely, but because the track was built right into Tomorrowland's structure, ripping it out entirely would cause way too much work to be done for little reward. So now the track sits atop the Tomorrowland scenery as a reminder of an attraction that guests may never get to experience again. Moving on. Original DCA entrance. Ah yeah, the original DCA entrance. Longtime parkgoers know about this one. I myself have been going since I was about 4 years old. Not because I was rich, but because my mom worked there. Now because I went so many times as a kid, I, along with many other kids, remember the big California lettering and the postcard look of the original Disneyland California Adventure entrance. It's important to note that California Adventure was not always the park that you know today. The park we know today is a giant mashup of everyone's favorite characters and hobbies. Going into the park today, you can go soaring over California, ride the Incredicoaster, help Rocket rescue the Guardians of the Galaxy, learn to draw your favorite characters, and hell, you can even go buy a beer and listen to live music. But the old Disneyland California Adventure was a completely different atmosphere and environment. People always wonder why it's called California Adventure, and it's because the name stems from the forgotten purpose. The purpose of the park was to capture tourist attractions and high points in the history of the state of California. Now this was a hit or miss for park guests, as you either saw this and thought it was a charming idealistic version of California, or you just thought it was straight up tacky. The original entrance is a telltale sign of that. You had the big letters spelling California in the front that everyone loved to sit on or play around, with 2 huge ceramic mosaics on either side with the Golden Gate Bridge in the middle. Which, by the way, at the time, this was in fact the largest ceramic mural in the entire world. The park itself had many other references to California, such as the Hollywood area of the park, the Golden Gate Bridge, and even when you first walked in and were treated to a view of the sun icon which sat under a wave fountain. The obvious symbolism here was the sun for California's usual sunny weather, with the wave fountain representing the abundance of beaches that a lot of people frequent. The original DCA entrance was themed to look like a postcard. In fact, if you stood far enough away from the entrance, it looked as though the sun was setting on a nice day in California, with the sunset peering behind the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, as neat as this was, the atmosphere and overall theming just never hit home for many guests. It was for this reason that there was a major overhaul of reworking the California Adventure Park, with one of the last major changes being to the front entrance in 2011. The debut of Buena Vista Street just a year later is what we see in the park today. Buena Vista Street, along with the redesigning of the front entrance, was meant to resemble Walt Disney's first experience stepping into 1920s Los Angeles. Now, for those too young to remember, or those unfortunate enough to not be able to see the big letters for yourself, don't be too upset, as you can actually visit the letters as they were meant to be seen in person. The letters remain standing at Cal Expo in Sacramento, California, and serve as a part of the main entrance to this event. So if you ever want to get some real Disney nostalgia, you know exactly where to go. If you remember going to the original California Adventure, let me know your experience with the park in the comments. I recall it feeling like an empty shell with not much to do. But after attractions like Toy Story Mania and the World of Color came out, the park began to see a real change in vibe and overall experience. It's personally my favorite park to visit when I go to Disneyland nowadays. Let me know your experience in the comments. Moving on. Soundsational Parade. Mickey's Soundsational Parade premiered on May 27, 2011 at the Disneyland Resort. The parade was meant as a celebration of music and color, with the floats all themed around music. The full parade had characters from a wide variety of Disney films. Leading the march was Mickey Mouse playing drums and cymbals on a large float, while also directing a group of 6 snare drummers at the front of the parade. Then you had other floats like Aladdin and Simba, who both sat atop drum-shaped floats. Other performances included a float themed around Tiana's New Orleans from The Princess and the Frog, and another float built to look like Rapunzel's Tower, which featured Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Belle, and obviously Rapunzel. There were many others in the show as well, but those were the characters I feel like most people would know right off the bat. This parade is one of the few parades at Disneyland that actually had a daytime and a nighttime run. However, the nighttime run was put on a hiatus during the Disneyland 60th anniversary celebration in 2016. The parade that would replace this was called the Paint the Night Parade. The Soundsational Parade wouldn't see the light of day for nearly 3 years. Within those 3 years, a lot of parades came and went. This was because after the Paint the Night Parade came out, Disney decided to scrap it altogether in place of another already more established parade that you should all know about now, the Main Street Electrical Parade. The Electrical Parade would come back in 2017, replacing the Paint the Night Parade. And after the Electrical Parade was finished performing later that same year, the original Soundsational Parade was still not allowed to come back and was put on the back burner in light of Disneyland's Pixar Fest. It was only when the Pixar Fest finished in September of 2018 that Disney would bring back the original Soundsational Parade later that year. The Soundsational Parade would eventually be replaced yet again in July 17th of 2019 in favor of another parade which is still going on at Disneyland to this day. That parade being Mickey and Friends Bandtastic Cavalcade. This one is currently the one that performs in the center of Main Street, USA. Don't feel too bad if you did not get a chance to see the original Soundsational Parade, as the performances can still be found online, just like many of the other parades on this list. Moving on. Captain EO. If you have parents that grew up at Disneyland, or if you yourself are that parent, you should know exactly what Captain EO is. Captain EO was a 3D science fiction film that starred none other than the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. The film played at the same Magic Eye Theater that everyone knows as the attraction that is right next to Space Mountain. It's one of my personal favorite attractions to go on, as it's a perfect way to just chill for like 20 to 30 minutes in a nice air-conditioned room. Captain EO was the premiere film that debuted along with the Magic Eye Theater. The film itself costed over $23 million to make, but it was accompanied with special effects that went along with the music and film thanks to the Magic Eye Theater. The plot told the story of Captain EO and his ragtag crew on his mission to deliver a gift to the Supreme Leader. They all arrive on the planet that is riddled with rotting twisted metal. The group is captured shortly after arriving and is sentenced to prison and torture by the Supreme Leader. However, Captain EO is not having it. He explains that he can see the hidden beauty within the Supreme Leader and that he brought the key that will allow her to see it. He immediately begins singing the song, "We Are Here to Change the World." Initially, the song is working, but when Captain EO decides to yeet his jacket on the ground, one of the crewmates named Hooter slips and breaks his instrument, which abruptly stops the music. Captain EO gets swarmed until Hooter repairs his instrument. Then, in true Michael Jackson fashion, he performs his heart away and transforms all of the dark slaves and guards into agile dancers that fall into step behind him throughout the entire performance. Finally, Captain EO is able to unlock the beauty within the Supreme Leader, transforming her into a beautiful woman, and also transforms the planet into a beautiful paradise. The film ends with the song "Another Part of Me" playing as Captain EO and his crew triumphantly exit the situation. This is one of those films where you really had to be there to get the full effect. After its initial 11-year run from 1986 to 1997, the attraction did not see the light of day until nearly 13 years later in 2010. It was in this year that it was brought back and with more special effects. I was lucky enough to watch it a few times before it closed in June of 2014. And let me tell you, this attraction was really something. I even bought a pin because of how much I liked it. The music and special effects really made the show stand out, along with the fact that Michael Jackson's performances are honestly just amazing in general. The show was a smash hit both times that it came out. Unfortunately, you can't experience Captain EO the way it was meant to be seen in 4D, but you can find the entire thing on YouTube. I will leave a link below to it for those that want to be hit with some nostalgia or possibly experience it for the first time. It's definitely worth one watch. Moving on. Luigi's Flying Tires. Luigi's Flying Tires was a bumper car style ride that premiered along with Cars Land at Disney's California Adventure. The ride featured tire-shaped bumper cars that didn't work like your typical bumper car ride. You see, instead of allowing people to control the ride like a regular car, you know, like with a steering wheel and the gas pedal, they thought it would be a great idea to instead blow air at the bottom of the vehicles so you would float air hockey style, with the vehicle acting as the air hockey puck. Now, while on paper this sounds awesome, it does not work in practice at all. If you guys had the displeasure of going on this ride yourself, you know my exact opinion of this ride. For the first year or so that it was out, the ride was always packed, and I'm talking like an hour wait or more. And then when you finally got on the ride, you realized how hard it was to actually steer the damn thing. The way it was supposed to work was you and whoever you went on it with had to lean in the direction that you wanted to go. As you can see from the footage of the ride, many people are putting their hands up and leaning from one direction to another. Now, this was fun for like the first 5 seconds. Once you hit someone though, you just kind of awkwardly sat there for 10 seconds trying to build up momentum to hit someone else. To make matters worse, if you were too light or too heavy, your car would kind of just sit there and spin in circles for the entirety of the ride. That was another issue. The ride was only 2 minutes long. So after the first minute and a half of figuring out how to steer the damn thing, you only had 30 seconds to really enjoy it, which is barely enough time to bump into one single person. Most of the time at the end of the ride, you'd just be exactly where you started, spinning in circles. Now, I feel like Disney knew this ride was absolutely ass cheeks because when the ride initially opened, they actually had giant beach balls that guests were able to hit around while on the ride. Now, that definitely made the ride more fun, but at that point, it's not really the ride that's fun, it's more the fact that you get to hit a giant beach ball. It's similar to how when you're at a baseball game and someone just randomly hits one of those beach balls into the crowd. It makes the experience more enjoyable, sure, but the baseball game didn't do anything to earn that enjoyment. Now, this sounded fine and all, and it was, but after 2 months, the beach balls were removed due to minor accidents that guests complained about after being hit with the beach balls. Not long after, the ride could be found being super barren with wait times as low as 5 minutes. The ride would only last 3 years until it was eventually replaced by Luigi's Rollickin' Roadsters, which is honestly just another ride meant to keep crowds away from the bigger attractions, but it's definitely a step up from the original ride. Moving on. Skyway. Skyway is a long forgotten attraction that first premiered at the Disneyland Resort in Southern California. The experience you would get from riding Skyway was the same experience you might get from jumping onto a ski lift. The ride featured these buckets, which if you don't know, are actually called gondolas. Gondola just meaning that it's this type of ski lift cable type of ride. The buckets could only fit 2 people initially, with 2 patio style chairs being bolted into each bucket. With 42 buckets in total, the ride would act as a shuttle from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland, and if you wanted to, you could even go from Fantasyland to Tomorrowland, as the ride had 2 stations to come and go from. Now keep in mind that during this time, Disneyland was still on the ticketed system. If you don't recognize these, basically, you would walk into Disneyland and instead of buying a one-size-fits-all ticket that grants you access to every single ride, it was done county fair style, where you would have to buy a booklet of tickets that looked like this. When it came time to decide if you wanted to ride something, you would have to look at what ticket allowed permission onto that ride, and you would tear it out and hand it in order to gain admission to that ride. So knowing this, if you took the Skyway to Fantasyland using one D ticket, the only way to get back to Tomorrowland was to use another D ticket. This is just something that I wanted to point out because I feel like most people forget how much of a pain it really was to ration out your tickets. You couldn't just go on everything freely. Now, as I was saying, the 2 stations could be found in Tomorrowland and Fantasyland. The station in Tomorrowland was called the Skyway to Fantasyland, as if you took it, it would take you directly to Fantasyland. And vice versa, the station in Fantasyland was called the Skyway to Tomorrowland, because obviously it would transport you to Tomorrowland. The ride itself was a big hit amongst guests, and the ride stayed for almost 40 years. During this 40 years, there were several reworks and rebuilds of the ride. During the time the Matterhorn was being built, Skyway was closed because the Matterhorn was to be built smack dab in the middle of the ride. The obvious solution was to just scrap the Skyway ride altogether, but that's not what Walt Disney wanted. Instead, he chose to build the Matterhorn around the Skyway attraction. This actually improved the overall experience, as now the guests that would get onto the Skyway attraction would travel through the Matterhorn bobsleds to see this part where the Yeti would scare the bobsled riders. This further increased popularity among parkgoers. However, it would take nearly 5 years for the Imagineers to figure out how to fit more people on the ride's buckets. Finally, in 1965, the ride reached its max potential when the attraction's original round 2-seater buckets were replaced by these slicker designed rectangular 4-seater buckets. This was made possible by utilizing a lighter material to make the buckets, which allowed for the weight of 2 more people to be added onto each vehicle. The only other incident or rework that took place was during the early 1980s when the Fantasyland renovation was in place. This made it so the Skyway ride would only make round trips from and to Tomorrowland. Disneyland would eventually close the Skyway ride on November 9th of 1994. At the time, the closure is said to have been because of the declining popularity of the ride, and also because they needed the workers that ran the Skyway attraction to work on the then upcoming Indiana Jones attraction that would open nearly a year later. There was also another rumor that went around explaining how one of the bucket seats fell 30 feet below, but this was proven to be not the exact story, and charges from the man claiming the incident were quickly dropped. Unlike the People Mover incident, this ride's remnants were removed from the park, but the Fantasyland station actually remained all the way until 2016. Later in 2016, Disney finally ordered for the destruction of the original Skyway building, leaving this experience to remain in the minds of those lucky enough to ride the Skyway attraction. If you are one of those lucky few who were able to get on this ride before it was closed, comment below with your own personal experience. Moving on. A Bug's Land. A Bug's Land was the original land that connected Hollywoodland and Cars Land. The debut of Bug's Land was a critical part in the success of Disneyland's California Adventure. A Bug's Land was brought to California Adventure during its time of hardship. Before the debut, the park was actually losing money every day because of its lack of attractions. You see, back then in 2001, there wasn't any real reason for a family to go to California Adventure, as there weren't really any attractions that were geared towards younger kids. While in complete contrast, Disneyland had a plethora of everything from dark rides to less intense thrill attractions. This is where A Bug's Land came in. A Bug's Land was the saving grace that paved way for more creative attractions and lands to come to California Adventure, and it's honestly the reason we have the rides that we see there today. The inspiration for the land came from the original It's Tough to Be a Bug show. This attraction, being basically one of the only attractions for younger audiences, was a huge success, and because of this, Disney decided to open an entire Bugs Land. The park debuted in October of 2002 with 5 new attractions. These 5 attractions were mostly well received by its target audience, but it still got a lot of hate from other park goers. Mostly for the same reasons that the entire park at the time was getting hate, because of its use of generic rides. For example, Tuck and Roll's Drive-'n Buggies was a simple reskin of just a normal bumper car ride. Flicks Flyers was a generic swing attraction, Heimlich's Choo Choo Train was a lazy, uneventful train ride, and Francis Ladybug Boogie was simply a Teacups knockoff. Now, when looking at this attraction through a more cynical lens like this, it's clear that it was a pretty cost-effective attempt at bringing in more ticket sales. However, you have to give props to Disney, as this land did exactly what it was supposed to do. It brought in a ton more people and is the biggest factor in California Adventure being able to become what it is today. Sadly, A Bugs Land was announced to be closing in 2018 in lieu of the new Avengers Land. It officially closed on September 4th of 2018 and will be remembered by many. I personally don't take too fondly to it, and to be quite frank, I didn't even realize it was supposed to be its own themed land. I thought it was just a really cool Bugs Land themed area that was a nice shortcut to the Tower of Terror and the Hyperion Theater. The land truly was a hit or miss for most people, but as of today, it's been completely gutted, with some of the attractions being used in other parts of the DCA park. For example, Flicks Flyers was actually rethemed and reworked as the Inside Out emotional whirlwind ride that is located at the Pixar Pier. It is stipulated that some of the other attractions have been donated or sold to collectors, but not much information is known about the whereabouts of these attractions. What we do know about is that A Bugs Land will be remembered by those who were lucky enough to walk through it and really feel what it's like to be as small as a bug. Let me know in the comments if any of you personally enjoyed A Bugs Land. I myself was too old for the rides, but I'm sure there was a good amount of people that may have grown up loving these rides. This actually brings us to the end of layer 2 and to the end of this video. Again, I will try my best to get layers 3 through 5 out in the next video, but I do want to stick to my 1 video a week schedule. So if I have to, I may have to end up putting layer 5 into another video. If you guys would like to stay updated on my videos, be sure to check out my Twitter, as I frequently post updates there for my content. Also keep an eye out for any community posts I put out, as they contain lots of important information regarding my channel. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the subscribe button and don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss another upload. I wanted to give a quick thanks to all the support I've been receiving as of late, and honestly, it's starting to look like I might be able to do YouTube full time. Only time will tell. With all of that said, I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.